In 2007, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Al Gore for a documentary about climate change. That same year, the committee also considered another candidate, a 97-year-old woman living in poverty in Warsaw, Poland. She had no documentary, no speeches, no global platform. What she had was a list. A list of 2,500 names, 2,500 children she had personally smuggled out of a Nazi death zone, hidden in jars, buried underground, so that one day they might find their families. She lost the Nobel Prize, and almost no one knows her name. To understand what Irina Sendler did, you need to understand what Warsaw looked like in 1940. The Nazis had invaded Poland, and they had a plan. They forced nearly 400,000 Jewish men, women, and children into a single district of Warsaw, an area barely larger than New York's Central Park. They called it the Warsaw Ghetto. They surrounded it with 10-foot walls topped with barbed wire, guards with orders to shoot anyone who tried to escape. Inside, the Nazis rationed food to 181 calories per day, a single slice of bread. People were dying of starvation, of disease, of cold, of despair. And beyond the wall, the world continued as if nothing was happening. Irina Sendler was 29 years old, a Catholic social worker employed by the Warsaw city government. She had grown up alongside Jewish families. Her father, a doctor, had treated Jewish patients for free when no one else would. When he died of typhus, contracted from his own patients, the Jewish community paid for Irina's education. She never forgot that. Irina stood 4 feet 11 inches tall. She was small, quiet, and utterly determined. When the ghetto was sealed in November 1940, Irina did something almost no one else did. She obtained a special permit, through her position at the Social Welfare Department, to enter the ghetto under the pretext of inspecting sanitary conditions. Every day she walked through those gates, wearing a Star of David armband in solidarity with the people inside. She smuggled in food, medicine, money, forged documents, but she quickly realized that food was not enough. The children were dying fastest, and the Nazis had begun rounding people up for the trains to Treblinka. Irina made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She would get the children out. What followed was one of the most daring rescue operations in the history of World War II. Irina assembled a network of about 25 volunteers, mostly women, nurses, social workers, teachers. Together, they developed 5 methods to smuggle children past the Nazi guards. Some children were hidden under stretchers in ambulances. Some were concealed in trunks, suitcases, and body bags on trolley cars. Some were sedated and carried out in toolboxes. Others were guided through the sewers, the underground passages beneath the city. And some, the ones who could pass as Catholic, were walked out through a church that sat on the edge of the ghetto wall, entering through one door and leaving through another with a new identity. Each child received a new name, a new history, forged documents. Irina placed them in orphanages, convents, private homes, anywhere a family would take them in, and she wrote every single real name down on tiny slips of paper in code. She buried them in jars under an apple tree in her neighbor's garden so that after the war, if there was an after, the children could know who they really were. Between 1942 and 1943, Irina and her network saved at least 2,500 children. On October 20th, 1943, the Gestapo came for her. 9 soldiers climbed the stairs to her apartment. In the seconds before they reached the door, Irina threw a package out the window to a friend waiting below. The package contained the list, the names of the children, the jars. The friend hid it under her coat and disappeared into the street. The Gestapo took Irina to Pawiak prison, the most notorious prison in Nazi-occupied Warsaw, from which almost no one ever returned. They broke her feet, they broke her legs. They demanded the names of her co-conspirators, the locations of the hidden children. Irina said nothing. She was sentenced to death. On the day of her scheduled execution, members of the Polish underground bribed a Nazi guard. Irina Sendler walked free. Her name was posted on public bulletin boards as among those executed. She assumed a false identity and continued working. When the war ended, she dug up the jars. She spent years trying to find the children she had saved, to give them back their names, their histories, their identities. But most of their parents had been killed at Treblinka. The children had survived. Their families had not. For the next 50 years, Irina Sendler lived in near total anonymity. She had nightmares every night of her life. She would ask herself over and over, "Did I do enough?" In 1999, 4 teenage girls in rural Kansas stumbled across a single line in a magazine. They assumed it was a typo. They researched, they wrote a play. They called it Life in a Jar, and they discovered that Irina Sendler was still alive, 89 years old, living in poverty in Warsaw. They flew to Poland to meet her. In 2007, Irina Sendler was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She lost to Al Gore. She died the following year in 2008 at the age of 98. 2,500 children, hidden in trunks, in ambulances, in body bags, in jars buried under a tree, saved by a woman who stood less than 5 feet tall, who never carried a weapon, and who never once considered herself a hero. When asked why she did it, she always gave the same answer, the same words her father had spoken to her when she was 7 years old. "If you see someone drowning, you must jump in to save them, whether you can swim or not." That is what they left out of the history books.